That's in your field notes. Like, remind me to get you your field notes, okay?
This is Habib John Gonzalez, an unusual name for a guy on an unusual mission to teach people how to build houses from straw.
That's it.
And go up 2 here, and then maybe 1.5 here, then maybe 1 on top.
Gonzalez has traveled hundreds of kilometers from his home in the BC interior to conduct this workshop in Stony Plain, a community just west of Edmonton.
Are we lined up?
Yeah. To mount an interior wall, you would take a 2x6, 2x8, or 2x10 and through bolt it with ready rod.
But he's not an engineer or even a builder by trade. In fact, the best label might be environmental crusader.
It's a passion. People have been looking for different forms of greener building methods, and straw bale construction has just really taken off on the grassroots level.
Gonzalez figures straw can replace wood in a lot of construction, giving farmers a new market, providing better insulation, and taking some of the pressure off the forests.
And that can generate income, and it can also reduce, the amount of fossil fuels we use for heating. And they grow in 1 year. That's very, very important. It's an annually renewable resource.
At his home in the Slocan Valley, Gonzalez keeps a stock of straw baled extra tight for construction. He runs workshops here, too. One of his first groups built this straw utility building.
Yeah, they had this finished in 2 days. The walls went up in 1 day, and the rafters were up that same evening. They were very
At first glimpse, it's not much. But Gonzalez says straw walls affect people.
It's very sensual. You're always getting this sort of, you're being fed by the textures in the walls, by its sound-absorbing qualities.
Well, let's take a look inside.
Surely.
It does appeal to the senses, but does it make sense to build with straw? Gonzalez has spent the last few years trying to get answers to the concerns building professionals and journalists can raise.
And what about the idea of rodents, things living in the walls?
Well, as straw, it doesn't have much feed in it. It isn't like hay, like the old traditional Nebraska homes. And we're finding that this is a pretty poor environment for critters. That once they're sealed in here, they're more entombed than anything.
Mice might not be a problem, but water can be. That's why Gonzalez installed moisture meters in this shed.
And they're part of a volunteer study that we're taking part in for CMHC.
Now, does that mean that moisture is the big question?
Yes. Yes, of course. Because we don't have moisture barriers, that it is a fiber, but there have been, a tremendous debate as to how appropriate this, this technology is. Again, what we're trying to find out is why it works as well as it does.
He searches out that knowledge on the internet. There are places like the southwestern U.S. where straw construction is part of the building code. Here, the technology is in its infancy. That's one reason Gonzalez doesn't live in a straw house. Local inspectors wouldn't give him a building permit.
Actually, I'd already heard from another builder, and he was just saying they're pretty uncomfortable with it right now. And I introduced myself to say, this isn't up for negotiation. We've got to get a house here. My wife certainly doesn't want to live in a trailer, and so we'll get the shop built and move into the shop, and then build our straw bale home later.
And this was how many years ago?
This was 2.5 years ago.
A lot's changed in 2.5 years.
A lot's changed, yeah. A lot's changed. Yeah, we have 8 houses under permit right now, and probably 4 more under application.
Those dozen homes are all connected to Habib Gonzalez in one fashion or another. He's made it his business to help others get building permits for their straw bale homes. His workshops often revolve around the construction of those homes, and each is an opportunity to spread the word. At the very first straw bale home to be built in this part of BC, the walls are still being plastered by family and friends.
At first it sounds loony. When Don first called the head building inspector about 5 years ago in Vancouver to find out the logistics of building a straw house, and nobody had ever inquired before, he said, "Are you calling from the
you must be calling from the Kootenays."
He said, "We get all our weirdest calls from the Kootenays."
Susan Lowe and her husband Don started building their home in Creston more than a year ago.
Yeah, it's definitely a learning experience.
But some of the most time-consuming work had to be put in before they even prepared the building site.
Here, take some more.
We had an engineer who was open-minded and interested, and we had a building inspector who was open-minded and
But
interested.
they both thought we were crazy at first.
Crazy because straw bale construction is not in the Canadian Building Code. You have to convince local building authorities to give you a permit, and that can be tough, in spite of the growing body of research on this construction method. You also need an engineer to design the building and take responsibility for it. In this case, a family friend named Doug McKay.
So your name is on this building if anything goes wrong with it.
Yeah, my name's on it.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, I feel pretty good about it. They've done a really reasonably good job on this particular building. It was a learning experience for them as well as for me, and I think it's turning out really well.
Still, McKay understands why other building professionals steer clear of straw bale construction.
I would think that probably a lot of the engineers and architects have been used to working with a particular system and have a very good comfort level with that, and may not have the time or the inclination to look at something new like this and to develop that sort of level of comfort.
So does it mean that this is riskier?
No, I don't think it's riskier. I think it's just because it's something new.
One risk that comes to mind for most people is fire. There are reports of straw bale homes burning down during the construction phase. But once the bales are plastered in, studies show that fire is no longer a worry.
Yeah, it'll char on the outside, but it won't burn right through. They've done some testing down in Arizona and have found that the fire resistance of this particular wall is far greater than any fire resistance you'd ever get out of a stick-built frame wall.
So if there's a fire, which house do you want to be in?
I'd rather be in this one.
I'd say it was mostly an aesthetic decision, tempered by economics.
And ecological.
Yeah, for me, economics, for her, ecological.
Straw bale homes can save 20% and more of the lumber conventional houses require and provide an R value of 35 to 40, almost double what you'd find in most homes. But the Lows believe work bees like this may be the only economic way to build.
I think the one difference between this and a regular house is I think it's more labor intensive.
So if you're going to hire somebody to build a house like this, unless they're very experienced, I don't think it's cost effective.
We have just found an insurance company that's willing to take this on.
A 2-hour drive from the Lowe's place, Cam Matheson is already living in his straw bale home, even though there's still work to be done. He too got started at a workshop run by Habib Gonzalez.
Yeah, there was a lot of good reasons for me as a professional to look at that and feel good about using it. So that the bales are all butted up to that, and then you...
Matheson builds homes, conventional ones, for a living. He's convinced that helped him get a building permit from local authorities. Getting the bankers to put up a mortgage was a different story.
They thought that having a straw bale structure on the land would devalue or decrease the chances of reselling this property. So the bank said no. I didn't build this to sell it. It was more a labor of love, but I think where we live, I think there's a lot of people that really would appreciate this type of building. I don't think it would have any, it may even be a benefit.
Inside, Matheson's brand new home feels solid and mature, partly because of the recycled windows and doors he used.
I really love the softness, the gentle, the rounded corners, everything's, undulating. It's not sharp. I mean, in a conventional home, we put drywall on, and we try and make it look like the human hand hasn't touched it. I mean, that's a good drywall job when you can't see any trowel marks. So for me, it was having a house that looked soft, gentle, big, deep sills. There's just a real luminous quality and a gentle quietness about the houses that really appealed to me.
Matheson believes it will appeal to others too, and not just in the country.
This, I think, is around, it will stay because it is a successful way to build and it has lots going for it.
One final straw home visit to the Schlichting place. It's another one of those labors of love, though the walls aren't even plastered yet. Carl Schlichting designed it. He's also finishing it in his spare time.
Straw was going to fit our requirement of being a more renewable material and an interesting sculptural material to work with. That's certainly one of my interests, is sculptural alternatives to just a standard straight wall.
Schlichting has taken extra care in his design with those large roof overhangs to avoid moisture problems. This building is a kind of architectural statement for him, one that he expects will last a long time.
It's just a smart material. There's no concerns that we have about its longevity.
Now we have orders for 1,500 bales.
The Schlichtings got their start in straw from Habib Gonzalez, who's become a family friend. Like most people pioneering this building material, they share a vision of what a home should be.
For the most part, people really want a relationship with their building. In the building of it, in the idea of these are the least processed materials, they're least toxicity, that are beautiful, you know, so you have this ongoing rapport, you know, with the building. It's part of your history. You know,
But
even
for
just
Habib
having to tell
Gonzalez, the
perfection.
straw bale guru without a straw bale home, helping others is going to have to be good enough for now.
It's being with the people and being involved in a very simple earth-based technology. I find that very rewarding. You know,
For the magazine, I'm Jim McQuarrie, near Nelson, BC.